Job began chapter 12 by mocking his friend's supposed wisdom and saying in verse 3, "But I have understanding as well as you. I am not inferior to you." At the beginning of chapter 13 in verse 2, he says something very similar. "What you know, I also know. I am not inferior to you." Together, these form brackets or an inclusio for his criticism of his friend's knowledge. It is not easy to see the faults in the speeches of Job's friends, especially with the clarity that Job does. He is sure of two things: his innocence in this situation of personal disaster, and that his friends speak lies. Because at the end of the book, God will confirm that these friends have not spoken of him what is right, which Job has done. We will have to trust Job that he knows something that we do not. Or perhaps it will be better to say that he understands something that we and Job's friends do not. As one commentator has written, the issue is not facts, but meaning. It is the question of what divine intention is revealed in the course of human affairs. The friends have learnt a collection of facts and doctrines through various means, whether through revelation or observation, and applying these, perhaps quite brutally, to Job. But it seems they have not understood these things. They have the data, but not the interpretation. Job can see this because they criticize him, because they cannot take into account the fact that he has not merited this disaster, and that God has brought it upon him for no apparent reason. And so they mechanically apply their so-called wisdom without pausing to take in the reality of the situation. This is not just bad news for Job, who has to endure their comments, but it's bad news for the friends, because they are now in danger of offending God, who they think they are defending. Job warns them in verses 7 to 12 that if they show partiality towards God, as though in a court case, and speak deceitfully for him as witnesses, then they will be examined by him and ultimately rebuked. It is so strange to talk in these terms, to criticize something for showing partiality towards God. Surely the safest thing any mortal can do is to shrug and say, God is correct, whatever happens. Showing partiality or favoritism was normal in this world, except in a legal setting. Biblical law does not have, like us, a process where witnesses are brought forward on behalf of the defendant or prosecutor. They are to be completely impartial, and their testimony is to be presented to whatever end. Job accuses his friends of siding with God. They are not being honest and saying things as they truly are, which would mean that, even if they did not understand, they would have to acknowledge, above all, the fact of Job's innocence. Instead, they want to side with God, declare him just for punishing Job, and insist that Job has deserved it. But God hates partiality in law, and even though they want to speak for him, they do not do so in truth. Their wisdom, therefore, is no wisdom at all. No wonder Job recommends that if they would truly be wise, they would be silent. Job now turns his attention back to God and addresses a prayer running from 13:20 to the end of chapter 14. He begins by asking that God would allow him to speak to him in safety. If God treats Job like this and remains hidden, how much worse would it be if Job comes into his presence? So Job asks for safe passage in this dialogue. In the first section, verses 1 to 6, Job asks why God even bothers to scrutinize something like a mortal, whose days are few and who are all born in sin. They are limited and finite. Why not leave them to enjoy what little there is to enjoy in life? Even trees are better off than humans, as he goes on to say from verse 7, because if cut down, they can grow again. But humans, once cut down, are never seen again. There is no hope of resurrection in Job, and indeed mentions of it are rare in the Old Testament. The prayer is, of course, filled with sadness and despair, but it reveals the depths of a real relationship that seems to have gone very wrong for reasons Job cannot guess. In a moving moment from verses 13 to 15, Job wishes that God would hide him in Sheol, in the underworld, until his anger faded, and then God remembered him and longed for the work of his hands. Then, as he says, you would call, and I would answer you. Here I think we can see that the depth of Job's loss, not just of his family, health, and honour, but of the relationship he had with God. The prayer ends on a note of despair. As the mountains crumble and water wears away stone, so there is no hope for mankind, because God destroys it with death. Verse 20 portrays God banishing a hopeful mortal who has come to plead for ongoing life. All meaning and value is thereby extinguished. If the children they leave behind are honoured or dishonoured, the dead will neither know nor care. They grieve only for themselves and their ongoing pains. Job is not talking about hell here. He only means nothing better awaits him and the rest of mankind. Standing as we do now on the other side of the resurrection, we live in a light and a hope that is, contrary to what Job feels here, inextinguishable. But there are hard times in life for everyone, and things can happen which seem overwhelming in their cruelty and horror. It can be very hard for people in such circumstances who, even though they can still see the light of the fire, cannot for a long time feel its warmth. In Job we have some whose undeserved suffering has indeed caused him to see the world in its blackest shades, but yet resolutely engages with God, even if in anger, as the only way in which he can get an answer and perhaps some peace.